Hello everyone, welcome to my kitchen. My name is Michael and today we're going to be making mashed potatoes. Stay with me and I will show you how easy this is to make. Let's get started making our mashed potatoes. If you've never made mashed potatoes before, this is probably going to be one of the easiest things that you'll ever make. So we'll start with our potatoes. Typically, when you go out into the restaurants and things, you might find that they're using a russet potato, and you might even have those when you were growing up, and those are really good for mashed potatoes. And there is a Yukon Gold potato, which I prefer to make my mashed potatoes with. They're a little bit less starch in them than the russets, and when you get them mashed up, they're just a little bit creamier than the russets, but they both do good. So if you've got russets, definitely use those. I'm going to be using our Yukon Gold today. So let's go ahead and get our potatoes peeled. And I've got about 3 pounds of potatoes here. And what I do when I look at to see how many potatoes I'm going to be making for a meal is you kind of want to look at it. The Yukon Golds are going to be a little bit smaller than the russet potatoes. So you just want to kind of look at it and say, is that what I would eat? You know, is that enough what I would eat? And then you would kind of gauge that on how many people you're going to be cooking for. So if you're thinking, you know, you've got 2 people and 4 potatoes might be enough, and you might want to cook 6 in case you want a bit left over. I've got 10 of them here that I'm going to be cooking. So that's how you kind of gauge how many potatoes you want to make for your mashed potatoes, is basically how many people are you feeding, and what would you typically eat if you just ate this on its own. If you baked a potato like you would bake these russets, would you eat a whole one of these? Then that would be 1 serving, is how I would gauge how many potatoes to put in your mashed potatoes. So it's typically up to you how many people you're going to feed. And if you want some leftovers, you can make potato cakes the next morning for breakfast. Those are really good. And I'm going to go ahead and take the skin off of these and get these ready to go. And as soon as I get them peeled, I'll be right back. I'm going to go ahead and start cutting up our potatoes. And the key with this is we want these to be all the same shape, so that they all get done about the same time. If you have the thicker chunks in them, it's going to take a little bit longer for them to cook, and the smaller you have them, it won't take as long to cook. And so we're going to kind of cut these all up in the same size, and I'll show you roughly what size I'm going to put these in. So if you can see that, that's probably about maybe 1 inch, and we're just going to kind of cut those up all the same size. Got all even consistency, so when they do cook, they'll all cook the same way. So I'm going to continue to cut up the rest of these, and I will be right back, and we'll go to the stove and get this started cooking. All right, I've got all of my potatoes all cut up now, and they're all about the same size, and that way they definitely will get the uniformity. When they cook, they'll all cook at the same time. So I'm going to take these over to the sink and give these a little rinse and get some more of the starch off of these, and then I'm going to put them in the water. Now, the key to this is we want cold water when we put our potatoes in, and I'll explain in just a minute what that is. So I'm going to go give these a rinse, and we'll get these started cooking. All right, we are ready to start cooking our potatoes. I've just got my potatoes. This is a cold pot, and we're going to fill it with water. And I want to put just enough water in there so that they're covered. I'm going to put just a little bit more water on them to make sure they've got a good cover on them. Now we're going to turn our stove on, and we're going to bring these up to a boil. And then once they come up to a boil, then I'm going to turn them down to a simmer. The reason we're turning it down on simmer after it starts boiling is we want the potatoes to cook evenly through. So if you continue to leave it up on a high where it's boiling, the outside will continue to cook faster than the inside, and then you'll get a mushy potato. So we don't want that. So we want the potatoes to cook evenly and all the way through. The smaller pieces like I've got here should take about between 10 to 15 minutes to cook. We want them fork tender. We do not want them so done that they're falling apart. If you want to add a little bit of salt, you can. I might add a little bit of salt here now. And again, this is just to taste. I'll put just a little bit in, because once we start mashing our potatoes, then we'll definitely, that's where we're going to season it, and that's where you'll taste it to see if you want any more salt or pepper in it. So while we're waiting for this, I've got a stick of butter that I've got out on the counter here that I'm letting it come up to room temperature, and I've got about 1/2 cup of milk. I'm not going to use that much milk in these, but definitely bring that up to a room temperature also. It just makes it go a little bit easier when you're mashing them. We'll continue to bring these up, and I'll show you just a minute where we're going next. Our potatoes are coming up to a boil now, so I'm just going to give them a little stir through to kind of mix in that salt that I put in there earlier, and then we're going to turn this down to a simmer and let these continue to cook. And like I say, they should be done fork tender between 10 to 15 minutes. Okay, let's give these a test and see if they are done. And you can see that the fork went right through that very easily. So Also, another way to taste is the taste test. So let's give it a little taste and see what they taste like. Those are done. They're going to do a little bit more salt though. Now the next thing we're going to do is we are going to mash these up. All right, we are back, and I went to the sink and I drained out my potatoes, drained all the water off of them. Now you can definitely use the same pan that you mixed them up in. The only reason I put them in this glass bowl so you could see what I was doing. But definitely if you want to use the same pan that you cook the potatoes in, that works just as well. So I've got a couple of things here that we can talk about. I've got a potato masher. You might have one of these, and this works really well. Just mash them down. I've got a mixer that I'll be using today. And if you've got a ricer, that works really good also. If you don't have that, you can use the back of a spoon, because these are pretty tender now that you could just mash them down with the back of a spoon, and that works just as well also. So you've got plenty of options if you don't have a hand mixer, or if you don't have a potato masher or a ricer. The back of a spoon works just as well. I did taste them, and I know we're going to need a little bit more salt in them. Okay, now we've got our potatoes here, and I've got some milk. I'll say I've got about a half a cup. I'm not going to use all of that. But I've got a stick of butter here that I brought up to room temperature, and that just makes it easier for it to be able to beat it through, especially if you're doing it by hand. It'll make it a little bit easier to do it that way. And then I've got salt and pepper. That's all we're going to do with them today to make your mashed potatoes. So I'm going to go ahead and cut up probably about 2 tablespoons. And again, this is all to taste. If you like a lot of butter on your potatoes, you can definitely start out with more. And we'll put just a little bit of milk in it. And then I'm going to put some salt and pepper in it. And that is to taste, however you'd like that. All right, I'm going to use my hand mixer here. All right, so we've got our potatoes started, and I wanted to show you what they look like. So they're definitely not ready yet. I'm going to put just a little bit more butter in them, and we're going to put a little bit more milk in them. So we'll put about another tablespoon of butter in it, and just a little bit more milk. You want to go sparingly with the milk, because you can get them too creamy too quick, so a little bit at a time works the best. So let's give it a mix a little bit more. All right, I can tell we are getting close. So I'm going to take my spoon here, and let's give it a good mix through and just see where we're at. That way you can kind of see the consistency of what I'm looking at here. So as you can see here, we are very close to the mashed potatoes that you would typically see or eat. So it's not going to take much more. There's just a few lumps in it left in there, and that is okay too if you like that. A lot of people don't like it really mixed through very well, so if there's a few lumps in it, that's fine too. And I'm going to give this a test to see where we are with our salt and pepper. I think they need a little bit more salt. I'm going to put just a little bit more pepper in them, just for good measure. And I'm going to put just a little bit more butter in it, maybe half a tablespoon. And let's get our mixer back and mix this up again. All right, let's give it one more try. Let me grab another spoon and see where we're at. Those are perfect. So you can see how easy this is to make. I'm going to look and see. I probably didn't use 1/4 cup of the milk, but I did use half a stick of the butter. So I did use half the stick of the butter, and I did salt and pepper to taste. And this is, again, very easy to make. Like I say, this was almost 3 pounds of potatoes that I made here. Just measure them out to what you think you would eat in a serving, and that's what your servings, or how many potatoes you want to cook for how many people you're cooking for. So if you definitely want some leftovers, then definitely make more. When you're cooking them, bring them to a boil, and that way when you reduce them down to the simmer, they're cooking evenly all the way through. Make sure you get consistent sizes on when you cut them up. That way when they are cooking, that they'll all cook at the same time. So this is how easy it is to make mashed potatoes. I hope you like this content, and if you did, check out one of these other 2 over here. You might find something else you like, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye-bye now.